Hey, what's up, good people, man? You are tuned into another episode of Fatherhood is Dope, the podcast. It's your guy, Aaron McGee. Man, I'm always excited that you decided to join us again for another amazing conversation. Today, I have a special guest, per usual, because all of them are special. But because he's on today, he's special. Y'all say what's up to my guy, Kieth White. Kieth is an attorney, an entertainment attorney, a manager, a husband, and the thing that qualifies him the most, and I think what makes him special is that he is a father to how many daughters?
Five.
Five amazingly beautiful daughters. I've been all up on your Instagram page all week, man. Just admiring all of the beauty. So Kieth, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, thanks for having me, and I appreciate. I'm honored to be here. So
yeah, for sure, man. So Kieth, man, you really got put on my radar because we have a mutual. My friend, I think he calls you friend too. So we have a mutual friend who man, he knows I do the podcast and just has raved about you as a dad. He knows you from the entertainment space. You know, you guys have been on the road together and that traveling with artists, and we can get into that. But the thing that stuck out the most to him about you is your posture and position as a dad. He's like, man, every time we're on the road, he's always talking about stories about his daughters, about his wife, about, you know, things that he wants to do for them or things that he's already done for them. And so, man, let's just crack that case open, man. You know, what did you always know that you wanted to be a father? And considering you're a father of five girls, how do you approach fatherhood?
So I think that I've always wanted to be a father because I've had very strong male leads in my life, right? My dad has served as my father, but also as my best friend for the last, I'm 44. So the last 44 years, right? So that's, to me, a lot of my social cues around fatherhood and manhood come from my dad.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that I've always wanted to be a father. Now, being a father of five is one skill set. Being a father of five young women is a whole other conversation. I think that in some respects, I think it's my high honor, right? Like, hey, we're giving you the responsibility of guiding, providing, and also learning from five women. But at the same time, it also could be karma, from running around as a young,
Don't say it.
right, as a young dude, completely reckless with a lot of things, mm-hmm. and then having to come into the reality of how I show up in the world in the face of my daughter.
Yeah, man, that's challenging. You know, every time, particularly, so I'm a girl dad, and mm-hmm. I feel like when do we get the opportunity to kind of switch our point of reference? Because most dudes do that, man. We always feel like it's this sense of karma when we have girls, you know, so we go back to like our body counts and stuff. And I'm like, but women don't say that when they have boys. You know,
honestly, I'm not even talking about my body count, because honestly, my body count wasn't even anything crazy.
Okay.
It was really, when I say karma, I mean how I showed up in the world, right? Like I think that men, I think that we exist with a certain level of privilege in the world. And I think that many times we are blind to that, right? We have blind spots in our own privilege because we spend so much time talking about white supremacy, capitalism, corporate infrastructure. We spend so much time talking about systemic issues, but one of the things that we often kind of neglect is how empowered or unempowered women are in these conversations. And I think that having daughters put that at the forefront for me, because I was like, yeah, I'm not raising suckers. I'm raising leaders. I'm raising people who are going to be disruptive to the status quo. And I find it difficult to operate in spaces, or I find it difficult to watch them operate in spaces where they're often neglected or left to be invisible because they're women, particularly Black women.
Yeah, that's good. So I appreciate it, because so now, thank you for that, because that's a totally different lens of, even as Black men, what I hear you saying is that, we do have to acknowledge our privilege, our male privilege.
Right.
And, my wife and I, we had these conversations all the time where she'll hear me make a comment based on a show or something we will be watching. And I didn't realize that I was speaking from a place of privilege. And she was like, but you have a wife, you have a mom, you have a daughter. And I'm like, oh, word, I get that. And so to your point, I'm actually, I appreciate you saying that, because I'm taking it in, even in this moment, to realize that, we carry these banners of, bringing down X, Y, and Z, but what am I doing right now as a dad that's going to, outside of, providing and being the priest of my home and protecting, but what am I doing from a civic perspective and culture perspective that really, is going to make it that much easier for my daughter? I think we do have that responsibility.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that we have a responsibility to make all of the unfair structures and systems uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's even when it comes to parenting, right? Like, we have a parenting privilege in the sense that we're, oftentimes, whatever I'm feeling throughout the day, or feeling throughout from work, or feeling from the world, right? Oftentimes our families become our punching bags, because we're like, they're the people that are closest to us. And we can tell kids to do something, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to make sense all the time. And now my conversations with my kids, especially my teenagers, they're like, no, that's not fair. That doesn't make any sense. And we can have comprehensive conversations about fairness and equity in the household. So now everything that I'm out here in the street preaching about, right, in terms of like white supremacy, Black Lives Matter, all of these things that I'm doing, I have to model it in my home first. Because if I don't model fairness, equity, and comprehensive dialogue in my home, then it won't resonate anywhere else.
Yeah, facts. Man, I just have a toddler who's 3, but I should have even said just, because she's taking in so much. She's able to comprehend a lot. And I know that the actions that I have toward her, now you have me thinking about these frivolous moments that I say, just go back upstairs for a minute and I'll be up there. Where, but it's in so many ways, it's for naught. And it's my parenting privilege that's really speaking. So I'm already called out. This conversation is not going good for me already. Keith, I mean, so you're the privileged father of 5 amazing daughters. And, man, as I read about you online and see, what you have going on social media, I'm really trying to figure out how. When I say how, like how do you have the capacity to do some of these things that you're doing? Like, I was looking at, I have like 3 things that stuck out in as it relates to your civic engagement, but you have the girls' education mentoring services that you're part of. You're on that board?
Yeah, I'm on the board. I was the chairman, and then I took some years off, but I'm still on the board. Yeah.
So then you have Kings Against Violence Initiative, and then is this the Brooklyn Combine?
Yeah, the Brooklyn Combine.
So honestly, I say I'm not going to even pull it all. Like, this brother is you're civically engaged, civically plugged in. I'm sure like your social IQ is there clearly as it relates to what's happening across the country. But what's even more importantly, and some people miss the mark on this, is what's happening locally. And that's evident just as if you do a quick Google search on you, you can see that. And so I know how that can pull on you. I ran for school board here in Nashville because we got a school that's right here behind my home. And and I ran a nonprofit as an executive director and CEO for almost 5 years. So I know how taxing it can be to stay engaged, stay in the loop. But I only have one daughter, and and that's a lot for me to manage, even as she's 3. So I'm looking at you like, how? That's my question. How you getting it all done, man? Where are you finding that balance?
It's all community. It's all community. So I can say, so for the Girls Education and Mentoring Network, it's called GEMS. That's an anti-sex trafficking organization, and it's the founder and executive director is Rachel Lloyd. She's an amazing survivor of the life, and she's literally going around grabbing young women off the street and finding services for them and working through the criminal justice system to decriminalize these women who are being trafficked. They're being victimized and then prosecuted. And so she's doing that work. We have an amazing staff of almost 100 people. We have an incredible board. So it's community. That's a team effort, right? I get to be a part of. I'm honored to be a part of that team. With regards to CAVI, Kings Against Violence Initiative, that's Dr. Rob Gore. He's the founder and executive director. I'm the vice chair of that board. And we do restorative justice work. We go into hospitals. We find victims of violence. And instead of allowing them to work through cycles where they perpetuate the violence that's been enacted upon them, we work through the trauma to get them to a place of healing. And again, we have an incredible board, an incredible staff, and we're working through several schools. And so that's in partnership. And so that's that. And then with the Brooklyn Combine, there's 11 of us.
Yeah.
And so there's 11 of us, and some of us are attorneys, some of us are creatives, and we work in community. It's really been an incredible experience to be in community with really incredible partners. And so I'm allowed to do that, but I'm privileged to be in these spaces and work in these spaces because I have community. Same thing with my home. We have 5 daughters, but it absolutely has to be a partnership between my wife and I. My wife is a doula and a business owner herself. And so we have to work in tandem, in partnership, and doing all these things. I think so early on in my career and in my life, I was working in silos. Yeah. And I would just be like in a box, just kind of like working. And when I would make mistakes, I wouldn't know I made a mistake. And so I would compound, right? I would compound a mistake with another mistake. And I found myself kind of like drowning, making mistakes, almost fatal. And so when I had the cataclysmic moment in my life where I was like, things have to change, I was like, I need to work in community. And when I began to work in community, I just began to be really part of these really impactful organizations. Sorry to talk your head off, but yeah.
It's a podcast. That's what I'm here for.
Right.
This is my job, Kieth. If you stop talking, I don't have any work to do, man. I'm like, well, Kieth, it was fun while it lasted. Oh man, that's powerful. I'm always challenged. Well, first of all, mad respect to you. I understand, and I know firsthand the amount of engagement, especially you talking about volunteer roles too. You have your sources of income that you have to manage, and their priority, they need you. And then you go over here and you give yourself in some capacities even more, being fully engaged to these places that are that you're serving on as board member, board chair, vice chair, whatever, in a volunteer capacity, man, and to show up with that type of zeal. I think it takes a special type of person. It takes a special type of person to work in a nonprofit, first of all. But then when you get an engaged person, like it seems like you are, that's a whole nother level. I always say, if I'm hearing from someone like you, man, I dream about board members like you that know how to actively and responsibly advocate for our mission. And I also think that the sweet part, man, is that you get to work with not just any executive director, but the founders and executive director of 2 nonprofits, which, their grind is is completely different. I was an ED where I inherited an organization from the founder, and he stayed on board. But as hard as I worked, it's just
It's different.
it
It's different.
it is, and that's
A
what all do.
founder-led organizations have a very special thing in their DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and it's instructive because you know how to approach that nonprofit, but in sometimes it can be destructive because founders become crazy, right? Like
They do.
and it's almost expected, and it's almost necessary to be crazy about the cause, because when you're the founder of an organization, a nonprofit organization that is on the front line of an issue, you're responsible for holding the ideological lines, right? And so holding the ideological lines means making unpopular decisions that aren't necessarily going to be popular, but you'll be on the right side of history. And
Yeah.
I say that because in the organizations where I serve, particularly gyms, there have been entertainers who have wanted to come and do very forward-facing, external-facing activations and say, yes, I'm part of gyms, I support gyms, I've given gyms money. And gyms has said, and gyms is operating in excess of $10 million a year, right? So it's not necessarily a very small nonprofit.
Yeah.
But operating at that budget is hard to turn down money. But
Yes.
Jim's, our founder and executive director, has absolutely turned down six-figure checks from people who you would think that they're not problematic in terms of their PR, but they're on the wrong side of an issue in terms of, she's holding the ideological line and saying that we don't call women who are who are trafficked, we don't call them prostitutes.
Mm-hmm.
We don't use that language. Our language is very intentional. They are trafficked women. And
Yeah.
I think that there's so she's very strong on policy. And some people might feel like it's the extreme, but it's because she has to be. She has to hold that line, because if she doesn't hold that line, nobody else is going to hold that line. And that's the tough part about founder-led nonprofit organizations.
You say they have to hold the ideological line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I feel like I can pose this question to you in terms of, because when I see you doing all of this, I feel like you're holding this ideological line of fatherhood and really holding this banner high, right? And really showing us the way. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what I want people to see with you is that, like, it's all possible, right? And so even with you holding this front line of fatherhood, showing, being civically engaged, doing these things in entertainment, what do you believe drives that? And a lot of people, I'm not going to answer it for you. I was going to give you my perspective, but let me hear from you. What do you think drives it for you?
I mean, I feel like I wake up excited every morning to do what I do. I'm incredibly blessed in that sense, that I get to go to court, try cases, and fight against bad ideas. And then I get to be a part of policy, driving policy change. And then I get to spend.
That's all in the court.
That's in court. And then when I get out of court, I get to go to an office where I'm pushing policy. I'm working with nonprofits. I'm working with legislators to work to change the world. And then I get to come home, right? And I get to talk about that work with my kids, with my wife. And then I get to go to bed and do it all over again. So I wake up excited about what I do. Now, when it comes to the music stuff, I've pivoted. So yeah, I used to be very heavy into music because that's a passion for me. Music is still a passion for me, but I don't operate in the management space anymore. That's too time consuming, and I'm 44 years old. I'm not going to be running around with an artist trying to get them to take my advice, right?
Yeah.
So I only practice entertainment law, and I limit my practice. So now I don't do record deals where artists are signing over their masters. I have an ideological policy in my office where I only represent artists who are going to own their labor. If they're not owning their labor and the fruits of their labor, I'm not doing the deal. So, um, so that limits, my activity in the entertainment space, because that's a liberation ideology that not everybody is necessarily subscribing to.
Man, talk to us, Keith. Like, so where does this mindset come from? So was this always the case, or you used the word pivot? Okay, so there was an awakening. Like, what's going on over here, man? So give me just a little bit more backdrop on you working in the industry or in that management space. Because I had that you were a former manager, because I was tapping into my sources and they was like, nah, he don't manage no more. He just and so how did the pivot come about, and can you give us just a little backdrop into just being in that entertainment space?
So when I was managing artists in like 2004, 2005. Maybe before that, like probably 2003, but I didn't actually like really do anything like get somebody signed.
Were you already an attorney at this point?
Yeah, I became an attorney in 2001.
Okay.
So, but I was in the DA's office. I was a prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for a few years. Sorry, so let me go back. When I was in undergrad, I worked at Rockefeller back in 1995. I worked at Rockefeller Records before they were with Def Jam. I worked at Mercury Records when I was in college as well, and I worked at Polygram. And then I went to law school. When I was in law school, I didn't do anything entertainment-wise because I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to know how to try a case in court. And so I wanted to be able to be the type of attorney that, if I said something, if I said I was going to sue you, it was serious. So that's what I did. And then a few years out of the DA's office, my passion for music never went away. So I started managing some artists. I had an artist get signed to Atlantic Records. I had writers do publishing deals with Universal Music Group. And then I had some artists do some deals, and they didn't really like pop off, right, the way that I had wanted or expected them to. But what I learned about that experience is that the music industry, or the music business, I should say, the music business is like a fraternity. And, being in that fraternity requires you to give something in exchange. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that you give up in exchange are values, very personal values. And there was a time where I gave up my values to be in this space.
Yeah.
But I saw that it wasn't worth it. And it didn't yield the thing that I thought that it would yield to me in terms of power, money, and these things. And so I reclaimed my values, and I said, I'm just gonna, whether it worked for me or not, who knows? But I'm gonna operate from this perspective. And so that was like maybe 2010, right? 2009, 2010. I started operating differently, and then I met a few artists whose values were in alignment with mine, and we actually did some good business. I managed a little bit, maybe until about 2015. I did some management, and then I was like, you know what? Being a manager really is a young person's game at this point. Somebody that's got to have the energy and the time to run around and be in spaces, and also try, look cool. I'm not interested in looking cool. Yeah. Or trying to be cool at this point. I'm interested in some other things. I think my interests scale. And so and then it just became a constant kind of like my constant search to reclaim my values or find what I value, find what I think is important, and really be in alignment, do things, execute and act and conduct myself in a way that is in alignment with my values. And that's where I find peace. When I'm in alignment with my values, the things that I value in my conduct, I'm at peace. And when I'm not at peace. And so, that really kind of was the driving force in some of the changes that I made.
Yeah, so you're saying this pivot happened close to 2010, and you just
2010, I was having a professional crisis. I was having a personal crisis.
at
I was at
34.
I was at a crossroads.
Yeah, man. Hey, you give me hope, man. I don't know what's to come, but it sounds like you've kind of flipped the script, and you're carving out the path that you want for yourself. And
Absolutely.
as I'll be 34 next month, so I'm like, I'm taking notes over here, man. Because I'm still after my preferred future, and I think that is really powerful, man. When because in the grand scheme of things, 33 and 44 is still young in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty powerful, to be able to latch on to your values at an age like that, especially coming out of this whirlwind of the music business and in industry that you're referring to. I think that's powerful. I just wanted to speak to that because I know dads out here who are chasing things that's not always associated with the entertainment industry or the entertainment business, but just chasing ideas and goals and dreams. And you capture something and you realize that, man, I sacrificed a lot, left a lot out, gave
Yep.
a lot of myself, and it didn't yield what I wanted it to yield. So just wanted somebody to hear it, man. Just from your
Yeah,
perspective.
I stopped chasing things and I started becoming things. Like that was the thing for me. I was like, yo, I'm not trying to I'm trying to just be I'm trying to be the thing that attracts the thing that I
Yeah.
want. And if I'm not attracting it, then I need to figure out what's happening internally. Right.
Yeah. Man, you a cold brother. All right, so you got one other thing going on. I mean, one other thing that I at least came on my radar. I'm sure you got plenty going on. But so, man, let's talk about this doctorate program, man. Are you still working this out?
Yeah, so I'm at the end of it. So back in 2009, 2010, I was like what who do I want to be in 20 years,
Yeah,
right? And I started kind of like mapping out who I wanted to be in 20 years. And I was like, man, I want to be, I want to get to know how change happens, how
yeah,
organizational change happens.
yeah,
And I started looking for a doctorate program. And it was crazy because I could not find a doctorate program that fit my needs, but also gave me the space to kind of like write the dissertation that I thought that I needed to write. So, I was like looking around and then I put it down for a couple of years. And in 2017, the space just opened up for me. And I had a family member who was a professor at USC. And so was telling me about how USC has this initiative to really expand the doctoral program that they have been building out.
yeah.
And so they invited me to apply.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh, okay. So I applied and I got in and I was like, oh, well, this is it. And so it's perfectly tailored for me. So I started the program in end of 2017, beginning 2018. And I did my proposal defense last year, and I do my final defense in the next month. So in the next month, I'll be wrapping up the program in the next month. I finished the principal writing of my dissertation. It's approved. My chair is on board, and I just basically I have to submit one more draft, and then I think my doctoral degree confers in October. So yeah.
Once it's conferred, it's conferred.
It's conferred.
All right, listen, are you going to update the social media handles, man? Are you going by Dr. Kieth, Dr. White, Esquire? Like what? I love to see when brothers get these added letters, but I don't know how much it means to you.
It doesn't. So the letters don't mean anything without application, and so I think that it'll give me some more credibility, throwing some letters behind the name, but I think that I think it's a lot of work to do. So,
okay, well, hold on. We about to pivot here, but I'm just thinking about, you said where you want to be in 20 years. That's why you went after the program. You wanted to learn about organizational change. So then the question becomes, where do you want to apply that? Is that applied on a college campus? Is that applied as a nonprofit consultant, a CEO of a nonprofit? Like, where do you apply this theory of organizational change? Because with the PhD, you've added something to the field somewhere.
Right. So I think that I think that I want to attack the field of study. The field of study is there's this concept, right, that nonprofits inherently do good work, and so they should receive donations. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of want to knock the framework off of that concept and say that philanthropy is a tool of oppression, right? Because as long as I keep you thankful for what I'm giving you, for what I'm handing to you, you never really pay attention to what you deserve. And so
you reckon me. Go ahead, man.
So I wanna kind of reframe the conversation around nonprofit work so that it's not seen as donations, but as an investment. And so now when you invest in a nonprofit, you expect a return on your investment. And your return on investment, right, should be tied to the social good as well as the financial return. But that financial return is not the gorging of profits. That financial return is really about sustainability. How do we create sustainable models for nonprofits to exist on par with big for-profit corporations and create a new model for how we value systems, how we value each other, how we value the place of exchange, the place of human exchange. And I think that, so as a field of study, right, and I'm talking broad-based, right, but as a field of study, the idea is to go into the marketplace and kind of like revolutionize how nonprofits are looked at. And that may be through a consulting. I don't know if that means consulting with nonprofits or consulting with for-profits. I don't know what that, I don't know if it means that, or if it means going into an institution, because the biggest endowments are at these institutions, right? Mm-hmm. What are they doing with these endowments?
Your Harvards.
Right. These are $1 billion endowments,
Emory.
Right? So maybe taking a look at their endowments and saying, what are you doing to create sustainable models of educational growth, equity, fairness?
Yeah.
What are you committed to? So yeah.
Man, that's a tall order, especially going after the institutions, educational institutions. But I would also, look at me, I'm trying to give advice over here, man. But I feel like a lot of businesses, man, they have millions of dollars and they don't know how to navigate those dollars in terms of contributing them to nonprofits outside of this idea of the outward face recognition, and also they don't understand the true ROI, like you said. So I flipped the script. I actually, one of my fundraisers, we do the breakfast, and it was the ROI breakfast. But my ROI was all focused on the return on the impact, opposed to return on the investment. And it's really showing that these dollars sustain X, Y, and Z. These dollars led to, it's almost like positioning them to be venture philanthropists. Like, they understand venture capitalists, on this side, but now you can be a philanthropist and still be a venture philanthropist, and like just double up blah, blah, blah. Long story. This added to the podcast. Yo, if you in nonprofit, then talk to us, leave a comment. We'll answer your questions. Give Keith the reason to come back.
Right. And but there's also the concept of impact investing. So
Yeah.
impact investing, as a capitalized term, is a very specific thing. And I've found through my research, right, I found that impact investing provides the same returns as traditional investments. And so, but we can talk about that. That's probably another conversation.
Man, listen, I need to learn from you. I need to read your dissertation. I need a mentor because that PhD is definitely on my radar, man. You know, sometimes, listen, I have to do one or two things at a time. So, yeah, you've given me a lot of hope, man, honestly, in this conversation, just about how to broach the idea of going back to school, completing my master's and things of that nature. Master's is done, so up next is that. So I appreciate it. So I'll be keeping up with you in that path. Man, let me pivot here real quick. I'm just thinking about, like, you're clearly, I hate using this term, I'm gonna use it for the sake of this conversation. You're woke, man. You understand, you're informed, you're civically engaged. You know, you have a pulse of what's happening locally in our country, in your community. How does that translate down to the type of conversations that you have to have, that you started having with your daughters as of March? Not to say that, you know, as a Black father, I'm sure conversations are always happening. I'm sure you're always talking to them about values, but going back to this idea of pivoting, how have you pivoted in your talks with your daughter post-COVID, post the racial climate? I mean, we're in a pandemic. We have race wars going. We got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
How are you talking to 5 daughters about this?
So I think that, well, one, I'm listening more than I'm talking most of the time.
That's good.
Right? Because they're closer, you know, they're closer to what's happening than I am, because, you know, they're on social media with friends, they're, you know, looking at pop culture, and they're imbibing all of these different things. So I spend a lot of time listening to them. I will say that we had a big scare with COVID. So I got sick in March, and you know, the COVID symptoms were like kind of like whatever, like they were bad, like, you know, it's like a depression, and I had COVID pneumonia. That was pretty bad. But I had some side effects that were really bad. I had some heart failure. And wow. So I was jammed up for a little while. So my wife was taking care of all the kids. I was in the hospital. And then when I was released from the hospital, I was quarantined in the basement. So the first month, you know, I didn't even have any contact with the kids the first month of lockdown, because I was hospitalized and in quarantine. So then coming out of it, it was like, I'm catching up with the world a little bit, and I'm catching up with their world. So I spent a lot of time listening. Then as I kind of got back to like work, you know, I had, you know, a bunch of stuff that I had to like catch up on with work. I started involving them in these conversations and involving them in the work. And so that's how the conversations have been developing. Then, you know, we've been a protest family, right? In 2016, we took our kids to North Dakota to protest the Dakota pipeline. You know, we always take our kids to protest.
Yeah, I saw when you rented the RV, you guys drove across country. When was that? Is that the same situation?
2016 or 17? 2016, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we've been a protest family. So the conversation around police violence, around what happened to Breonna Taylor, around what happened to Sandra Bland, Eleanor Bumpurs, George Floyd, these are constant conversations that we have. So our conversation didn't change when the latest wave of protests started. But I will say that the energy around the conversations changed.
Yeah.
And so what we started to do is we started to try to pay attention a lot more to what was driving that energy and what was driving the current conversations. And so as we went out to protest, we saw that a lot of white people were becoming much more educated about the issue, and they were educating one another. That doesn't mean that. Well, let me just back up. But we also saw white people that we clearly have problems with protesting, and so we were like, we need to be careful in this moment to make sure that we understand that when something is a trend and when something's popular, it's easy to do. That's not necessarily a protest. That's a performance. Now, when you become disruptive to the status quo and when you do something where people are not cheering you on, where people are not waving, because, when you're walking down the street and people have Black Lives Matter signs up in their windows and everybody's cheering you on, and, it's cool, and everybody's doing it. But when people are looking at you and ridiculing you, right? When the police are hitting you, right? When they're sicking dogs on you, when they're tear gassing you, that's a protest, and that's different. And I think that it was important for us to make sure that we distinguish to the kids that when you're truly going against the grain, and when you're truly going against the inertia of what's happening in society, and you're pushing back against things that we know are not right, are not fair, it's not going to be comfortable and it's not going to be fun. That's why the revolution can't be televised, because the revolution is not pop culture. It's not popular. The revolution is always going to be against what pop culture is pushing.
Yeah. So it makes more sense now why you used the term earlier. You said, did you say you're raising disruptors, system disruptors?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what protesters are about. That's what they're out to do. You know what I'm saying? And I've never heard this distinguished between performing and protesting. Mm-hmm. And I think that, there's performance on all sides too. When you look across the type of landscape that we have, when you can get a hot picture and a nice IG story, and you're holding my feet to the fire again, man, because we still have so much work to do, and I'm definitely doing my part. I'm contributing to the movement, man. And I've told all my friends, as I've talked myself off ledges and talked many of my friends off ledges, that we all have a role to play, even though our roles will look different based on our skill sets, based on our resources, based on our network, based on what type of bridges that we already have where we can talk across aisles. And, everyone has a role to play. And I think, man, what I'm hearing is that I appreciate you not neglecting to engage your family in this time, because especially like millennial parents, so many young parents who have kids, even between that 5 and 10 space. And like I said, my daughter's 3, but they're getting left out of the conversation. And I do think that there's an appropriate way to engage them. And we have to do our due diligence to figure that out, So before we told our daughter just flat out coronavirus, you contextualize it like the germs. Let's just break it down to the bare, to the etymology of this virus. It's a germ, it's a virus. So you start there and build up to coronavirus. Now she knows coronavirus and she knows COVID-19. But my point is, now you have me thinking about ways to make sure that she gets a piece and understands a piece of what's happening contextually,
Well, it's important to make sure that we're not passing our traumas on to our children.
Right.
And so systemic oppression, racism, capitalism, corporate and idolatry, and all of these things, these are traumas that have been pushed down on us. And we have to accept that we have been oppressed. It doesn't mean that we continue in that oppression, but we have to accept that there is a system that is oppressing upon us. And when we accept that, then we accept that it's our responsibility to push back on that oppression and make sure that we're not passing that trauma onto our children. So when we have a conversation about race, their lens on race and their conversation on race is going to be completely different, right? Because they come up in a different era. But it's important for us to make sure that they are able to fully contextualize what's happening in their experience with their peers and their colleagues, but then also be able to advocate for themselves in a healthy way, in a way that's not, pulling on my parents' trauma, pulling on my grandparents' trauma, but being informed, and I'm being informed by history. So if I'm fully informed by history, now I'm making reasonable, and I'm making non-emotional decisions and how I problem solve. And I think that that's a healthy place for our kids to be in. And then when we talk about the coronavirus, I think it's important. I think that's perfect, right? In terms of understanding that our responsibility to wash our hands and to keep good hygiene existed before coronavirus, and it will exist after the coronavirus, right? Now, people are getting sick, and being thoughtful and mindful about how we might contribute to someone else being sick if we're asymptomatic or something like that is an important conversation to have with kids. And that's the conversation we're having with our kids, right? Is like the conversation around masks and being tested is that's your responsibility to the public health of your community. And that's part of your social contract with humanity, right? We all have a social contract with humanity where we want to respect that.
Yeah. Teach us, Keith. Listen, my daughter is 3, and she's like, if I put my mask on, can we go to Target? I'm like, I don't know what type of kid listen, most kids want to see your phone to watch Noggin and YouTube. She's like, can I see your phone to look on Target? I'm like, we got to do better. We got to do right. Hey, Keith, man, before you leave me, let's just end on your girls, man. And like, I know, I see, that you've been able to travel the country, travel to other countries, and clearly you're taking your kids across country and things like that. But just speaking to the dads that are out there listening, man, like, how do you take your experiences, whether you're having them with your, like, experiences that you've had before your kids, positive ones especially, and like, how do those experiences, inform you in your fatherhood? And I'm thinking about, dads who have different resource levels. Like, how do we still get those dads to show up in the most robust way possible, even if they, quote unquote, have limited resources? They may not be able to take their kid to Canada, but I don't know, maybe you live in Nashville and you can take your kid to Memphis. Like,
so I'll say this, and this is something where my wife has held me accountable to. We've taken the trips international to other countries, Africa and all of that. But where I've had the most enriched experience is when I've put the phone down and just paid attention. And it didn't matter where we were.
That's
and
powerful.
I think that, and I would say that for dads, like the wage disparity or the privilege disparity in terms of how you spend and what you can spend is real. Like, I don't want to ignore that, right? Like, the idea of taking your kids out of the country or doing something like that is a powerful concept. But that's not the aspirational concept. I think what's aspirational is the quality of time, right? I remember I didn't leave the country until I was an adult, but I've got the best father in the world. And my most meaningful, important, and most powerful moments with him were sitting on the couch in our apartment in Brownsville, New York, without money, without anything of, material, but just sitting on the couch and him listening to me, him laughing with me, him joking with me, and me having his full attention. That's one of the most, and then one of the second most powerful thing that happened is when I had my first heartbreak. High school girlfriend broke my heart, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And he stood with me in a parking lot. I cried. He hugged me. and we stood there for 30 minutes, and I was just crying, and he was just hugging me and holding me. That was the most. That there's nothing, no trip, there's no monetary gift, there's no sneakers. I don't even remember sneakers or any gifts like that, but I remember those moments. And I think that for any dad paying attention to this, like, make sure that you take advantage of those moments.
Teach us, Kieth. Man, you know something? It's a wrap. We cutting. That's it, y'all. Y'all not getting no more. If you're getting any more, it's gonna be because he started a podcast called Teach Us, Kieth, where he drops all the gems. Man, this has been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Kieth White, Esquire, attorney. In a couple of months or so, be Dr. Kieth White. Put some respect on his name. Yo, Kieth, it's been a pleasure, man. I thoroughly enjoyed you, man. I appreciate you. You know, just want to send blessings to your entire family, your tribe, your community. I'm honored and appreciative of even. I'm in Nashville. You're in Brooklyn, but to know that there are men like you, dads, husbands, brothers like you that are still in the trenches, man, you know, doing this work for the nonprofit community, the mission-driven community, you know, saving the lives of, or advocating for Black and brown boys and girls with that work, and still aspiring, man. It's, you know, listening to you today, it's like, you know, something you think you arrive in a place and you realize that you still have so much further to go, and to see that you've been able to do it with so much joy, intentionality, without losing sight of the foundational thing of family and fatherhood is amazing. So I just want to sing some of your praises before I let you go out of here, man.
Man, thank you. I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been listening to Fatherhood is Dope, the podcast. It's your guy, Aaron McGee. Yo, I always tell y'all, man, do that thing y'all do when y'all find something you like. You screenshot it and you send it on over to somebody. So make sure you download the podcast. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, I appreciate you. Thank you guys for being so loyal and so faithful. And if you are new to the page on YouTube, make sure that you click that subscribe button and share the podcast, man. This Fatherhood is dope. Real men doing our part every day. That's dope. It don't get no better. Peace.